Welcome back, everybody. Here we are on the shores of Lake Erie. Seems like all my life I've been on or around these lakes. Probably not really, certainly most of my adult life. Spend time fishing, canoeing, water skiing, playing around on the lakes. It's nice and flat today. These things can kick up like nobody's business. Great Lakes have cost people lives over and over again. Somewhere around 100 people per year drown in the Great Lakes. They're deceptive with how fast they can move. Somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 shipwrecks laying on the bottom of the Great Lakes. And those are just the ones that went down that we know of. Not the ones who had an issue and turned over, dumped their passengers, or crashed into the rocks. The thing is, they can be flat one moment, especially this one, Lake Erie, can be flat one moment and literally just almost within minutes, it turns from flat into really pretty violent and can cause a lot of trouble. I remember a time being on this lake with a friend who I spent time fishing with. We lost touch, we got back. It seemed like we tried to get out every year, maybe once or twice, and it also seemed like every time we set a date that worked for both of our schedules, the lake would not cooperate and it'd be rough. I remember coming down and looking, the small craft flag was up. I had a 17-foot boat, and we looked at the lake and it looked like 3-foot waves, and we thought, well, we'll go ahead and give it a try anyway. And so we headed out, and we were fishing, looking off the back of the boat, and before we knew it, we were looking at the waves coming out behind us, and we thought, boy, these are a lot more than 3 or 4 foot. And I stood up and took a look around, and we were in some pretty dangerous water. I would say the waves were moving somewhere between 5 and 7 feet pretty consistently, and they were breaking at the top, which meant they were a little bit harder to drive on. I got the boat started and started heading in, and I can tell you my knuckles were white on that wheel as we came in. Just trying to figure out what to do to make it work. Really didn't know. My friend had no idea. He was riding alongside of me. He thought it was the coolest thing ever. I guess this was probably before the time of readily available camera phones, so we weren't filming anything, thankfully, or there'd be some pretty good video of terrified me out there trying to navigate a boat. But he just knew that I had been on the lakes all my life, and so he thought this was all probably pretty normal, or I wouldn't have been out there. And so as he was joking and having fun, I was just gripping that wheel and praying that we would somehow make it in. I think around the third crest that I came over, I couldn't go just over them. I had to turn the boat sideways and ride up the top of the wave, and just as we came over, I'd point the nose back in to ride down and then back to the side again and up. Around the third or fourth wave that I just couldn't quite get it right, they were moving so fast. We came down a little bit harder, and I noticed a crack starting to form on the console in the center of the boat. I moved a little bit to the side so he wouldn't see that happening, because I didn't want him to panic. The waves were straight out of the north as they were coming, and as I began to get closer to shore, I realized I had another problem. The boat launch that we came in had sort of an S shape. You pulled your boat back in, and you came over and then straight back out, and that faced straight to the north. And so we're riding these 5 to 7 foot rollers that were coming right into the mouth of this with rocks at the front. You had to come in and turn out of the wave action and then get up to the dock. I have to say, I really, at many points along the route there, did not think that I was gonna make it. I was pretty sure I'd wind up on the rock somewhere, and I was gonna be happy if I could get to the rocks that were attached to land, because at least we'd be back. That made me think of another story. Remember the story of Christ being in the boat with the fishermen, and my wife has scolded me on being too brief with my stories. Jesus and the disciples were out traveling, and he suggested that they get in a boat and go across the lake. They agreed, and so they hopped in a boat, and he, just out of exhaustion, laid his head down and he fell asleep. You can find the story in, I think it's in Matthew 8 and Luke 8 and Mark 4, I think. Maybe the other way around. Anyway, he falls asleep. Now there's a bunch of boats that come out with him because the people who are following Christ wanted to stick along with him. But as they're going across the lake, the boats are falling off because they're seeing that the weather is turning and the lake is getting rough. Now Christ is in the boat with a bunch of fishermen, at least a couple of them were. They thought they knew how to handle this kind of thing. And they did the best they could, but as the lake got rougher and rougher, it started swamping over the sides of their boat to a point where they came to the belief that they were lost. And at that point, they decided to wake Christ up just to let him know that, hey, we're probably done for here. We're out in this big lake and we're going down. They wake him up out of a sound sleep. And he can't figure out what all the commotion is about or what they're so worked up for. But he takes care of business first. He says, hey, what are you guys worried about? Don't you know this is just sea and wind? And he says, calm down, sea and wind, and everything just goes flat. He was the ultimate fishing buddy, the guy who could make the lake flatten out right in front of you. But as he finishes, he turns to the guys and he says, what is wrong with you? Have you so little faith that a little storm at sea can work you up to the point where you think all is lost? I guess these stories make me think about a lot about the times we're in, and there are so many good and fun lessons that you could learn from these. I have to say, I too, when I was stuck out there, when I started the boat, I knew it wasn't good, but I thought I knew what I was doing. It didn't take me long to realize that I was in proverbially over my head. I wasn't actually over my head yet, but I was in harder to navigate water than I had ever been before, and the things that I knew about how to do it weren't going to work. The guys also knew how to handle themselves as fishermen, but I often wonder how they went to the last moment before notifying Christ, literally kind of to let him know they were done. Did everything in their own power that they could instead of going to him first. Sometimes, and I'm sure some of you feel this way, in this life, we get so many things crashing in around us that we just think we're in over our heads. There's too much and we don't know what to do. We just can't anymore. I wonder what would happen if we went to Christ at the beginning of all this and planned a little better. I suppose things would go better and we'd be on a better track. But it seems like we just go and go and go until we can't anymore. And then we turn to him. Thankfully, in the 11th chapter of Matthew, Christ says, you know, at that moment where you just can't, come to me. All you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. The interesting caveat in that is he's not talking about lazy rest. He's talking about rest and confidence of being yoked to him because there's a purpose and a job and a duty for us to do. But if we burn ourselves so hard to the point where we just can't anymore, we're taking away the opportunity to really work arm in arm, hand in hand with him and see things through. Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. Take my burden upon you, for my yoke is light, and I'll carry it with you. And as long as you're yoked to him, the one who wakes up in the boat, sees the waves and the sea and just says, hey, settle down everything. We've got a job to do. I think things are going to turn out just fine. Friends, my challenge for you this week is to turn to Christ before you think your boat is sunk. And recognize that he's there for you, not at the end or in the middle, but he's there with you all the way through. What we've got to do is recognize that he's there and take advantage of the strength and the opportunity that he gives us. Recognize also when you meet people, whether you're meeting them on the road, pushing too hard and getting into conflict or road rage or whatever, that the people around you are very likely at a point where they feel like they just can't too. Instead of letting our boat sink and become just another number at the bottom of the lake, let's turn to Christ and encourage others too as well. Let's be good examples of what it means to yoke yourself with Christ. Not to lay back and say that's it, but to say, let me have the work that you have for me, and let me walk side by side, saddle to you, in companionship and in union. I guess I think about that in terms of the lake, because the lake is so good at giving you something that might look easy, but really turns out to be very difficult. That's often how life is. We get involved in things and we think we've got this until it gets just too hard to do. I'm so grateful to know that we have a God who calls to us just to let him be a part of it. He'll make it work. Not only do we have the best co-pilot ever, or the best boat rider ever, we've got the best person to be with in any situation that you could ever encounter in your life. But we as Christians need to get better at letting people know that that's how it works. It's got to seem awfully funny when you've got a guy in the boat with you who can make the waves stop just like that, to spend all that time bailing water out of your boat before you wake him up. I love you. That's all we have for today. Take care. Bye-bye.